my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be always acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Happy Good Shepherd Sunday. I'll come back to that in a moment, but first I want to speak briefly about ritual. We've been discussing ritual in my interfaith class, so it's been on my mind. How rituals are such grounding for spiritual growth and are ubiquitous across traditions. Of course, the rituals themselves may be different, but having ritual and their importance is universal. Even some animals display ritual-like behavior. It's probably no surprise to you that the Episcopal Church is full of ritual. One of them that we share across various other traditions is our lectionary. Every 3 years, we repeat the same readings. It may not spark anything the first or second time through, but once you've been following the lectionary for 30 or 40 or 50 years, the rhythm of the readings can provide a comfort and a way to measure growth. For example, you may think, remember how we heard these readings 6 years ago? We are in the middle of COVID lockdown. Or maybe when you heard them 30 years ago and you were in the middle of school. Look how far we've come. So while ritual provides a stable container, it can also be a little different from time to time. And that brings me back to today's readings. Did you notice a bit about sheep in them? The fourth Sunday of Easter, which is today, is always Good Shepherd Sunday. And the gospel is always from John 10. But each year, it's a little different. In this way, the ritual both grounds us and allows for growth and change. This year, we have John 10, 1 through 10. But it's really a continuation from John 9, where Jesus heals the blind man, the man born blind from birth. And the man's been healed and has heard the voice of Jesus, knows it and follows it, and thus will have life and have it abundantly. And that's the context in which we're supposed to read this lesson. In this passage, Jesus is mixing his metaphors a bit. He may not have gotten a good grade in English class, but perhaps the rules were different for Aramaic. So Jesus, as Good Shepherd Sunday implies, is the Good Shepherd. He's the one who cares for the sheep, loves them, and keeps them safe. You may notice, I don't know if you can see, artwork down here and the window are about the Good Shepherd, Jesus holding the sheep, loving the sheep. He keeps them safe. They, the sheep, or we, the sheep, know his voice and follow him. But then he says he is the gate. Really, it's door, but gate works better for sheep. He is the way for folks to enter into this abundant life. We are not to go in other ways as thieves and bandits. And even though I've heard this passage numerous times in the past, the image of the gate was never that meaningful to me until this year. And perhaps it's because my Aunt Nan, my hiking buddy on the Arizona Trail, is coming for a visit this week. And when I heard the commentators putting so much emphasis on Jesus being the gate, I instantly was transported back to all the gates we traversed on the AZT. Now there, the gates are mostly to keep the cows in the right place. We didn't see too many sheep, but lots of cows. And there are various styles of gates on the trail. Some are more easy to maneuver than others. Some are quite new and sponsored by a group or individual who loves the trail. Others are quite old and in need of a little bit of love themselves. The gates are memorable. One, they're good photo ops, but also they're milestones. They're on the map, and so when you see that the next one is 2.3 miles ahead, and then you reach it, you feel really accomplished. But in thinking about how all these gates relate to Jesus being the gate, I have a little different take than many of the commentators. They talk of the gate as being protective of the sheep, keeping them safe by keeping out the thieves. And that is true. But in thinking about the hike, the gates are also a point of activity. You have to actively hike to them and then do something to travel through. They don't automatically open for you. And because they're not all the same, some are a bit rusty, sometimes it takes a bit of work to open them. And then to keep the cows in place and keep everybody safe, you have to close it behind you. Now, I don't see this as an exclusionary thing. The gates are for any and all who want to do what it takes to enter. but you do have to want to pass through it. And then what's on the other side? On the trail, it's often more of the same. I particularly remember at the southern start of the trail, the border of Mexico. It wasn't a gate, rather a fence. There was also a bit of the wall that's been built between the two countries. That segment of the wall is pretty short. Mostly it's just barbed wire fence for miles and miles. But when we were there, it struck me that that literal line in the sand is so arbitrary. The land is not any different on one side or the other. And at our core, I know the people are not any different at one side or the other. It made me sad, both then and now, to think how these arbitrary divisions have caused so much pain and heartache over the entire human history. I wish there was an easier gate at that point. But occasionally, there was a big difference. And if Jesus can mix metaphors, then I can say two contradictory things and hope you can still see the truth in both of them. There was one gate in particular that we passed through that did take us into a totally different world. I never did figure out what it was all about, but it was extraordinary. Most of the parts of the trail we were on were desert. We did pass through some amazing cactus forests, but lush in a tropical sense, that wasn't in the picture. Except for this one area between the two gates. We came to, opened, and passed through one particular gate and entered into a totally different landscape. It was verdant green, a riparian oasis. Obviously, there was a significant water source somewhere, but upon entering, it didn't seem to make any sense. It was stunning. And as I read our passage from Acts today, that moment seemed resonant. Awe came upon us, as it did seem like a wonder in the midst of the rest of the landscape. And it also felt a bit like an ideal place in the midst of the harsher area of the desert. The story in Acts also seems like a bit of an ideal state in the midst of overall challenging times. The folks who had been baptized, passed through the gate of Jesus, now had abundant life. They were doing the work, devoting themselves to the teaching and fellowship, the breaking of bread, and the prayers. They were not being passive, they were actively doing all these things. And the needs of any were taken care of by the community. This was the picture of having abundant life. What do we think of today as having abundance? Too often, it's a big fancy house, a closet full of expensive clothes, multiple high-end cars, and a house at the beach or the lake, of course with the boat. We've worked hard and had some good fortune and feel we've earned this abundance. Kind of a far cry from selling one's possessions and distributing it to for the needs of all. But of course, that didn't ultimately work out very well for the folks back then, and when we've tried it in the modern area, it's also had some serious problems. It makes me think that was like the oasis between the gates. The ideal doesn't last. We have to keep moving on down the trail. But even now, 3 years later, I've taken a piece of that awe with me. So my question is, can we, in our own way, in our own time, also really strive to make it a reality that the needs of all are taken care of by the community? Can we truly enter the gate of Jesus? I'm kind of preaching to the choir, so to speak, with this group. Emmanuel Church is very generous with the needs of the community. You all support numerous programs to feed and provide emergency assistance to those in need in our community. Thank you, and please keep up the good work. But there's always more to be done. So my closing thought for you today, this time around, our ritual of the Good Shepherd Sunday, is yes, of course, Jesus is the Good Shepherd. Thus we shall not want, we shall be led to still waters and green pastures, and have goodness and mercy follow us always. I don't want to downplay the importance of that reading of the Good Shepherd, but I encourage you today to really think about how Jesus is also the door or the gate. And I would argue that like on the Arizona Trail, it's not just one gate at one time, but many. These gates are like the decision points in our lives. Certainly the biggest one is to follow Jesus in the first place. But that choice, that gate, starts to lose its potency if you don't continue to follow its path and make choices that are in alignment with it. Other decision points are also big life choices, as they have a huge effect on you. Where you're going to live, whom you're going to marry, what job to take. But there's also choices that one must make day to day, like how to spend your money, what causes to support, and how to respond to the ugliness and unpleasantness, whether it be harsh words from a neighbor or international affairs. These are the gates that keep coming up in our lives. I believe that Jesus always wants us to choose him, which is to choose love. It may take some work to get through the gate. Some are more challenging than others. Oh, and on trail, we did get lost a few times, had to backtrack and recalibrate. That is also life. We don't always get it right. Us sheep do go astray at times. But the Good Shepherd is always there, looking after us, calling us by name, encouraging us when we falter, and beckoning us once again to come through that sacred gate. Amen.